Welcome to the third ARTIC Network and CLIMB-BIG-DATA joint workshop on COVID-19. It's a great pleasure to do these workshops, and thank you very much for coming along. I hope you all enjoy the workshop and get a great deal out of it, and I look forward to participating and interacting with you. So my name is Nick Loman. I work at the University of Birmingham in the UK on both the ARTIC projects and the CLIMB-BIG-DATA projects. And like so many of you, for the last 2 years, we have been really focused on COVID-19 and most particularly SARS-CoV-2 genome sequencing and analysis. And I think it's fair to say that we've learned a great deal about sequencing and analysis at scales that we really have never anticipated would be possible. I think the largest project I worked on genomically before COVID-19 was sequencing as part of the ARTIC project working in West Africa on the Ebola virus disease between 2014 and 2016. And I think that analysis was around 1,500 genomes. So we are now operating at a scale that is completely unprecedented in genomics, whether that's microbial genomics or really any type of genomics. And so we've learned a lot, and the idea of these workshops is to try and impart some of that knowledge to you. But it's also an opportunity for us to hear about what you've been doing and any trouble, difficulties, challenges you've encountered. Because partly what we're trying to do, both in the ARTIC projects and the CLIMB projects, are generate tools, documentation, methods, approaches, protocols, etc., that can help with pathogen genomics generally and the COVID response more specifically. So there's a quid pro quo for how we do and why we do these workshops. So this is the third one we've done, and it's established a regular format. Some of the talks that we'll have will be similar to previous talks, and some of them will be all new. Most of them will be live, but a few of them will be pre-recorded. But in all cases, the presenter will come on after the talk to answer questions. So hopefully there's a really good opportunity to answer any burning questions that you have, and also to generate some discussion. So just to recap where we've been, it's the 13th of January today, and so it is just over 2 years since the first genome of SARS-CoV-2 was announced. You may remember it was actually announced through a website, virological.org, which is actually run by one of the ARTIC investigators, Andrew Rambo, and it was announced by Eddie Holmes from Sydney on behalf of Yongzheng Zhan, who is a professor at Fudan University in Shanghai. And this first genome kicked off a flurry of activity, and I think it's hard to understate how important the first genome that was released was in terms of our ability to mount a response to COVID-19. And I'm thinking particularly about the development of vaccines. Until that first genome, we didn't know exactly what virus we were dealing with. The first genome told us, of course, we were dealing with a SARS-like coronavirus, which eventually became known as SARS-CoV-2, but Yes, so 2 years ago, this post on virological was communicating the very first genome. So that genome told us what virus we have, now called SARS-CoV-2. It told us obviously what genes were in the virus. And of course, it told us specifically the sequence of the spike gene. And that sequence, in a way, was all you need to get going, making recombinant vaccines, and of course, the new class of mRNA vaccines, such as Pfizer and Moderna, have been unbelievably successful in terms of reducing the severity of illness and deaths. And so genomics couldn't be more important. The virus itself was characterized and detected through metagenomic sequencing, and subsequently has been surveilled through sequencing again and again globally to understand evolution. And as well as the vaccine, of course, the genome sequence has told us, has given us the information required to generate molecular diagnostics such as PCR. And as I say, the ability to detect and characterize cases, evolutionary trajectories, and of course, and this is something we'll come back to again and again in the course, the rise and fall of novel variants, new strains or types of the virus that exhibit some property that gives the virus enhanced transmissibility, altered pathogenicity, etc., change of immune evasion properties. And of course, now that is the key reason to be doing sequencing on a large, massive scale worldwide. And as an exemplar of that, I checked in on GISAID, the global database of genome sequences for SARS-CoV-2. And today there are over 7 million genomes in that database. That is actually more genome sequences than there are, I believe, genome sequences for not only any other virus, pathogen, or organism, but in fact, more genome sequences than there are put together for every other type of organism worldwide, globally. Quite an extraordinary number of genomes. In the UK, I, with many other people who will be presenting over the next 2 days, have been working on the UK response through a project called COG UK, and working with our local public health agencies. And that work, which has been largely analysed on the CLIMB platform using the ARTIC tools, has been responsible for nearly 2 million genomes in the UK. So we've pretty much seen everything that can go right and can go wrong. And that's kind of what this course is about. And just to emphasize that point, you know, this is a global effort. So although the UK has generated a very large number of sequences, the most valuable genomes, I would say, is the surveillance that goes on globally. COVID-19 is a pandemic, and variants can arise and emerge anywhere in the world where there's circulating virus, which is pretty much everywhere in the world, every continent. I think the only place that hasn't had SARS-CoV-2 is the International Space Station at this point. So, you know, the importance of global surveillance is exemplified nicely here by the South African epidemic waves. Most countries have gone through a sequence of waves, with each wave being dominated by a slightly different variant. And in South Africa, that was the kind of wild type variant, and then followed by a wave of beta. South Africa more or less avoided alpha, and then had delta, and then in common with pretty much everywhere now has Omicron. And the significance here is that the Beta variant and the Omicron variant were discovered and communicated from South Africa, Omicron also from Botswana. And so without good surveillance in all countries, we are going to be lagged, we're going to be delayed in detecting new variants and delayed in our responses. And so that is one reason it's really, really important for all countries to have good genome sequencing surveillance, have the technology, have the capacity, and have the analytical approaches needed to be able to generate sequence data and understand sequence data well. And that's so hopefully this is why you're here. And I'm really, really pleased to see such a large number of registered participants for this course. I think we've had 182 people registered. Not all of them will be at all of the sessions because of time zone constraints. But even better than having 182 registered, you are all drawn from over 50 different countries, at least according to your registration forms. So before I move on to just give you a bit more information about how the course is structured, I thought it would be nice, if you don't mind, most people like to keep their cameras off during courses, and that's absolutely fine. You know, and I understand that you'll often be juggling between your this course and your whatever your regular duties are, and that's of course absolutely fine as well. But I thought it would be nice just at this point to just pause and ask as many of you who are able to just to pop your camera on and give us a wave so we can see who you are and where you are, and just check that you are actually there, because it's sometimes hard to talk to the boxes on Zoom. Oh, brilliant. That's fantastic. Thank you very much. That is so much better. So let's give us a wave then. Just I can see lots of people now. Okay, so you are all real people out there. That's fantastic. Thank you so much. So yeah, you don't have to keep your cameras on. Well, it's nice if you want to. It's no problem. If you want to put your camera off, that's absolutely fine. All right, so I can see many of you are at home. Some of you look like you're in the office. You can see I'm actually in my home office today. I'll be in the university tomorrow, and it's nice to see where you're all coming from. All right, so without further ado, we'll just talk about quickly how the course is structured, and we'll get on with the first talks. So there are 3 sessions, and they each cover a slightly different aspect. And you may have more interest in some sessions than others, but I think they're all important. The first session is really a session about how we sequence SARS-CoV-2. So there's a bit of an emphasis on the laboratory work and the bioinformatics part, i.e. the initial handling of the data before it goes into downstream analysis. There is a slight change to this program. The talk at 10:45 will not be having, because Andy is not available. We might try and get that talk recorded and put on the website if you were particularly interested in that one. But so we'll skip that talk. Otherwise, the timings will jump from 10:45 to 11 with so Jeremy will start at 11 and Sam will start at 10. You know what I'm saying. Anyway, Jeremy will start at 10:45 and Sam will start at 11. Okay, and then we'll have discussion at the end. The next session this afternoon for us at least, will be focused on both sequencing quality control and also novel methods. And that will include a new talk from Catherine Siddle at the Broad Institute, who has a new method that was recently published to try and reduce the problem of sample contamination in SARS-CoV-2 sequencing, quite a topical area at the moment, particularly with the discussion of Deltacron, a possible Delta or an Omicron hybrid or recombinant virus, but probably not. So for reasons that we'll talk about later in the course. And there will also be some discussion of new approaches for looking at wastewater analysis from Chris Quince in that session. And then tomorrow morning, we are focused entirely on genomic epidemiology and phylogenetics and evolution. So we have some really nice talks that will introduce genomic epidemiology in a gentle way, and then introduce the process of phylogenetic tree building in an intermediate way, and then talk more specifically about SARS-CoV-2 phylogenetics, the definitions and the detection of lineages and variants, and then finally think about how we detect and define new variants. That talk from Anya O'Toole will actually be given by Rachel Cahoon from the University of Edinburgh. Okay, and so that's the structure of the course. There will also be some optional homework assignments. So if you want to, after the talks, consolidate your knowledge and what you've learned, there will be some relatively straightforward pieces of homework that you can do in your own time. We can answer questions on the homework tomorrow if you attempt that after the course. We're trying to encourage that these courses have a life beyond just these 2 days. So in order to facilitate that, we have established a Slack team with various Slack channels in there. You can access the Slack channel by clicking on the link on the course website that was sent to you when you signed up. And on there, there's the opportunity to ask further questions after the course finishes, and also to chat with anyone that you've met at the workshop if you want to continue to have collaborations. I am a keen Twitter user. Many of you, I'm sure, are on Twitter. Twitter has become, I would say, almost a definitive place for finding out information about SARS-CoV-2 science. I don't think there's anywhere better, to be honest. Twitter has various problems, not least it takes up a lot of time, but it takes up a lot of my time anyway. But it is an extremely good place to find out what's going on. And there is a very, very large number of people in this space tweeting links to papers, analyses, data in real time regarding SARS-CoV-2. So it's almost difficult to avoid being on Twitter, even though you might not like the idea very much. I will periodically post tweets with this hashtag, and if you want to say anything online, you can also use this hashtag to communicate the workshop. Okay, so that's the end of the introduction, and we'll move on to our first talk in a second. This is an opportunity to ask questions. So if you have any questions right now about how this is all going to work, do pop them in the chat and I'll try and answer them. Clearly, this is a day-and-a-half workshop, and so we can't teach you everything that you need to know in that time. The course is really designed as a starting point, jumping off point for resources, for ideas, for people that are engaged in this particular field. So it's the start, it's not the end point. But I just want to say that the more questions you ask, the more engagement there is in the course, clearly the more you're going to learn. So that we want to make this inclusive for people. So feel free to pop your questions in the chat. You can do that while the talk is going on. You can do that after the talk. If you feel too shy to put it in the chat, you could always send a message, a little question directly to the speaker. Obviously, Zoom lets you send a message directly to the speaker. There's the Slack channel I mentioned already. And if you're feeling confident, then put your camera on and just ask the question, and you can ask that during the talk or after the talk. We would much rather answer questions because you are not following, something's not clear. We'd much rather answer that at the point that you get confused, rather than listen to the talk not understanding what's happening. So really, please feel free to jump in and ask questions. You'll see that I've enabled the live transcription, which seems to do a pretty good job, at least with my accent. So you can hopefully look at that if that's useful to help understanding. And we are also recording the sessions, and the sessions will be made available on the course website soon after the course ends. So you have the opportunity to go back and catch up with things that you didn't quite catch first time, or you couldn't, if you couldn't attend a talk or a session.